there's an ecosystem around you, right? So you've got kind of core banking platforms. There's a lot of neo players out there. What would you see in terms of saying like who is, not naming names in terms of the partners, but who's more important in terms of saying, or would you be closely affiliated in terms of the domain? So in other words, like, is it risk? Is it core banking? Is it the gateways in terms of out to kind of some of the card providers? Like what would you see as the biggest kind of challenge, or the ones where you kind of see there's a natural affinity and kind of like actually the stronger we get in kind of this space, we're gonna both succeed?
Payments is a flow business. And I think, again, like a recognition of the difference between a flow business and a core ledger business. These are two different things, right? And so we would more logically have an affinity with other real-time, tech-focused flow type businesses, and how they would integrate into our sort of workflows, right? So that means fraud, AML, sanction screening, FX in flight, those sort of flow activities.
And potentially where that kind of, like you mentioned, fraud there, where critical things that are happening on your platform materially change the dynamics and risk. No, yeah.
No, well, so the area that we're now starting to work through is the nature of your ability to prevent fraud is largely driven by how much information you have and how good it is. But the bit that I think often gets missed is how you can then action that to prevent something rather than to review it after the event. And so, the area that we're now starting to explore on our side is, well, look, if we have flow from these different ranges of clients and we're continuing to rapidly grow the scale of what that looks like, how much more potent is an in-flight fraud prevention action on a platform like ours than it would be for each individual bank to try and solve that problem independently. And again, you're back into this space of, look, this is non-compete, right? Yep. The organization that's sending it, that thinks it's a genuine transaction, and the organization that's receiving it and doesn't think it's a genuine transaction, you really want the first organization to do this, right? You don't want to wait and hope someone catches it later. So, how that operates across an ecosystem and across a platform is, we're starting to work through how would we build that into the flows that we offer to clients, and how much better can we make it if we think about the entire flow across the platform rather than very sort of discrete pieces.
Point, yeah.
It's interesting the point you raised there. So I think two trends that are happening there is, when sort of fintechs get a scale, you can do something else.
Yeah.
That something is typically from a data perspective, because the modern technology allows for you to have better insight, real-time insight into a bigger pot of data. And then in data, from our perspective as well, anything fraud prevention is a fantastic area to go into. Yeah. From a regulatory perspective, it's the area you're always allowed to work on. Yeah? If you go into personalization, which we all want to do, it already becomes, especially in Europe, becomes much more constrained by market, what you can do and what you can't do. Yeah. But with fraud, everybody wants it. It's in the best interest of all participants to make fraud as low as possible. And it's an ever evolving game.
And it's hard, right? And so because of the fact that it's difficult to make that work and it's continuously changing, again, you end up in this space that says, well, what's the best technology to make that work? Yeah. How do you deal with technology that can also change at that same sort of rate, right? So you see some fantastic organizations dealing with behavioral analytics and some really smart AI combined with that behavioral analytics. And those guys have to work out how to plug that into the infrastructure of a bank. And that's really difficult, right? Because typically the place you want to plug that in is into a payment flow, right? So the interesting thing for us is, okay, well, if we start to think about, what does that landscape look like, then, I suddenly have the ability to talk to 100 clients about not just how to do something, but a very immediate and applicable way to do it. And I think that's where the fundamental shift in banks consuming platforms is becoming a platform and then consuming other platforms is their massive enabler, right? This is because then it allows other people who are focused in slightly different areas to really excel at what they do and still be relevant.
Or in your mind's eye, you've got like key flows, as you said, in the platform already, highly optimized and that kind of stuff. And now you're collecting a ton of data and just picking up on what you said there. Like in your mind's eye, like, are there those key areas where you would look to employ AI or machine learning in terms of, or, behavioral intelligence in terms of so in other words, because I can think of a couple. One is obviously in terms of saying, like, you can go to the customers and consumers and sort of saying, how does this change? Or frankly, with the large amounts of people now using your platform, you can go to them in terms of saying, well, actually, we're not seeing that from anybody else. So you seem to be a bit of an outlier. And why is that, you know?
Yeah, and I think we're just starting that thought process. So it's not what we do today. It's a logical extension of the scale that we're now starting to see in the processing that we're doing in the UK, and it's also a very logical and portable model for the services we deliver in Europe and then into the markets that we'll start to go into in about the next 12-18 months time around the world, right? Because as a non-regulated business, that makes our ability to service regulated businesses that much faster and that much easier to roll out. But I think to your point, data is a sensitive topic, right? And we don't do that today because we've not had the conversations with our clients, right? But the logical flow, the logical thought process is, there is value here, and it can make services more efficient and better.
Because the logic is, I know of some examples where within one bank they've looked at it more real time fraud prevention, and the results are great. And we know with data and AI/ML, as long as the data that you have is bigger, the results are going to be even better. You can see like Apple, right? They've taken a policy in terms of like privacy is the heart of the beast in terms of like their trust with customers. How do you cross that chasm in terms of with your clients in terms of saying like where, because you see everything, right? Everything goes through your platform. It's kind of like Google, Apple Pay or whatever else, where you see everything happening. On the one hand, you can see the intelligence, you can see kind of the smarts, you can sort of say like, either this customer or this segment or, this is trending up here and there. Like, I don't know I wouldn't even know how to have that conversation, I'll be honest.
Well, to be fair, the business model, there is enough of a business model for us in executing and solving this problem of the tech stack, right? So, we don't need to crack that problem. And so I think actually, for us, it becomes those additive conversations that say, look, in this environment for fraud, would it be better if we could use the data associated with everything we can see across the platform, across schemes, to help prevent this stuff in flight? And I think when we have those types of conversations, all the feedback from our clients is, look, these are the conversations they want to have, because nobody can present them with those solutions unless you've already got to scale and change the underlying technology and built the data model that actually allows that to happen. So nobody can rock up with those today as options, right? And so, they may or may not want to do it. But I think this idea of focusing on areas which are tough problems to solve, but are mutualizable and non-compete, essentially redefined using modern tech, I think is something that has happened in fraud. It has happened now. We've done it in the payments landscape. It's happened a bit in the sort of sanction screening space as well. Core banking is a bit different because it's not a flow business. Yes, and so I think that has, tackled the problem from a different angle, but it's doing the same thing. It's like, how do you get off in some cases, a 50, 60-year-old, ledger block and work out how to do that differently.